When it comes to how to sweeten green tea, there are a few different options. First, you can sweeten tea directly by adding things like Stevia or Agave. Next, you can eat a sweet alongside the tea to sweeten it indirectly without altering the flavor. Finally, you can select a sweeter green tea and prepare it the proper way so that you don't need to add anything to it. In this video, we're going to discuss 3 different ways how to sweeten green tea and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each one. We will also go through 11 different sweeteners you can use in your green tea instead of sugar. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of topics related to Japanese green tea, but for this episode, we're going to focus on sweetening green tea. If you'd prefer to read about green tea, we have dozens of articles on our website, neoteas.com. Just check the link in the description of this video. Without further ado, let's get started. How to sweeten green tea, 11 different methods without refined sugar. Number 1, organic honey. If you're trying to sweeten tea while still maintaining its more natural flavors, honey can be a decent solution. A lot of teas have these dried honey and floral notes to them that will be complemented quite well by the honey. Honey may also be a nice way to soothe the throat during cold and flu season, so it's a good thing to have alongside your cup of tea. Number 2, Stevia leaf. If you're looking for how to sweeten green tea without using refined ingredients, Stevia leaf can be a good solution. Although this leaf doesn't contain any sugar, it's incredibly sweet. The name Stevia refers to both the entire plant, and it's also a nickname for the steviol glycosides, which are the sweet components purified from stevia's leaves, and they can make an extract 200 to 300 times sweeter than table sugar. Make sure to use this sparingly. Number 3, organic coconut sugar. If you prefer to use a different type of sugar to sweeten tea, you can try using coconut sugar. This is actually not made from coconuts, but rather the dried up sap of coconut palm flowers. This sugar is still something you can avoid, but it's far less processed than refined cane sugar, so it can be a healthier alternative. Still use this sparingly if you can. Number 4, mint or lemon juice. Adding a little bit of mint or lemon juice to your green tea may not make it sweeter, but it still can make it more flavorful. This little added boost of flavor is enough to turn even skeptics into tea lovers. This is good if you're trying to cut sugar and sweetener out of your diet altogether. It may be difficult to do this all at once, but by adding little additives and flavorings here and there, it can make it easier to go without the sugar. Number 5, almond or soy milk. Because almond or soy milk contains sweeteners, it can be another way to sweeten tea without adding sugar directly. This method is particularly useful when preparing a matcha latte. Sometimes in your matcha latte, you don't even need to add sugar at all. You can just mix the matcha powder with soy milk directly. This will sweeten the tea and also make the matcha latte smoother and creamier as well. Number 6, date sugar. Date sugar is the best type of sweetener to use for many different recipes, but unfortunately it doesn't work quite as well in tea. Date sugar is made from dried and powdered dates, so it's essentially just a dried fruit rather than a refined sugar. While this does make it a healthy alternative to traditional sweeteners, unfortunately it is not a good way to sweeten tea. The reason for this is that because it's not water soluble, so it doesn't dissolve right into the hot tea as granulated sugar would. Number 7, organic coconut water. Coconut water can have a natural sweetness to it, so it does work well with certain types of green tea like matcha. This is a good way to add some extra potassium, electrolytes, and natural sweetness to your green tea, and it can be another healthy alternative to sugar. Number 8, agave nectar. While sweeteners like honey and agave nectar aren't a whole lot better for you than sugar, they do have a more natural sweetness that can be a better complement to the tea. Agave nectar is made from the nectar of a cactus, and the slightly more vegetal sweetness tends to work better as an additive to green tea. Number 9, add fruits. You can also add some fruit to your green tea. This is the healthiest way to sweeten the tea, and it can be a fun way to get your daily fruit intake in. Just add a couple of frozen strawberries to your cold brewed green tea, and you'll have a nice fruity and refreshing drink to enjoy in the summertime. Number 10, organic maple syrup. Maple syrup works surprisingly well as a sweetener for green teas like matcha, but it can work even better in roasted teas like hojicha. Hojicha is a great tea for the fall, and it plays off these warmer notes of coffee, caramel, and chocolate. This makes a great complement to the maple syrup, giving you a nice sweet cup of roasted tea to enjoy on a cozy fall afternoon. Number 11, blackstrap molasses. Blackstrap molasses is another healthy alternative to refined sugar, but it can be a bit of an acquired taste. We would not recommend using this as a sweetener for most types of Japanese green teas because the taste might clash, but it can work for heavier roasted teas like hojicha. 5 reasons to drink tea without sugar. Number 1, tea is a naturally healthy treat. If you made it this far in the video, you already know that tea is a healthy drink. Unfortunately, the positive effects of green tea are often negated by adding lots of sugar to it. Green tea is virtually calorie-free, but when you sweeten tea, you are basically turning it into a soda. This, in a way, defeats a lot of the purpose of tea, which is a celebration of simplicity. Number 2, avoid the crash. If you've ever had too much sugar, you have no doubt experienced a sugar crash. This might have been okay when you were a kid, but now you have things to do and can't afford the sudden drop in energy. When you stop using sugar to sweeten tea, you will also be avoiding the negative effects effects that accompany sugar. Number 3, save money with multiple infusions. When you brew high-quality, loose-leaf tea, you are able to get multiple infusions out of the leaf. You can use 5 grams of leaves to make 4 to 5 separate cups of green tea, each one with a different flavor. If you are able to enjoy each brewing of the tea, you can really save some money. Each cup of tea only comes down to a few cents if you prepare it right, and the difference between high quality and low quality is like night and day. Number 4, simplify the brewing process. Tea in its essence is simple. All you are doing is adding leaves to water. Within that simplicity is complexity, and that's one of the best parts of tea. The simplicity of tea is lost when you start to sweeten tea or add other ingredients to the infusion. Do yourself a favor and get back to the basics. You may find that there's something meditative about just adding the leaves to the water and pouring them out into the cup. Number 5, taste your tea. Finally, we come down to the most important part, and that is to taste your tea. The taste of the tea is everything, and if you're not able to experience in its fullest, purest form, you're really not experiencing it. When you sweeten tea, it's almost like you're looking at it through a foggy pair of glasses. The subtle sweetness that takes so much work to cultivate is lost, and even the pleasant bitterness that many tea drinkers enjoy is completely unrecognizable. There is something about experiencing the drink just as the farmer intended that brings a deeper connection with the drinker and the tea field that it was produced on. 5 ways to make tea sweeter without sugar. Have you ever wished that green tea would be a little bit sweeter? Instead of adding sugar to the tea and altering the natural flavor, there are 5 tips you can use to make your tea taste sweeter. 1. Select tea from a sweet cultivar. Our first tip has to do with the selection of the tea itself. Although all tea comes from the same species of plant, there are hundreds or even thousands of tea plant varieties. These varieties are called cultivars, and they are one of the many ways that a tea farmer is able to control the flavor of tea produced. While most Japanese green teas are from the Yabukita cultivar, this is actually one of the more bitter varieties of Japanese tea plants used for green tea. The main reason this plant is used is because it's tougher and more resistant to the frost of central Japan. In southern Japan, they are able to grow a wider array of tea plant varieties that can be a lot sweeter than Yabukita. If you're looking for a sweeter tea, go for one from the Saimidori cultivar or the Asatsuyu cultivar. Just switching up the cultivar of the tea you drink can make it a bit sweeter, but there are even more factors at work that determine the sweetness of a tea. Number 2, go for a shaded tea. If a farmer wants to create a sweeter tea, they will cover the tea plant in a special type of netting a few days before the harvest. When the tea plant is exposed to sunlight, it will begin to convert the sweet and savory theanine into more bitter catechins. In order to maintain a higher theanine content, the tea plant needs to be cut off from sunlight with these nets. The longer the tea plant is shaded, the sweeter it can become. Shaded sencha teas can be shaded for around a week. If the tea plant is shaded for over 10 days, it is considered a kabusecha. If the tea plant is shaded for a full 21 days or more, it can be used to make gyokuro or matcha, the 2 most prized green teas in Japan. If you really want a sweet tea, you should try and find a gyokuro or a kabusecha. The gyokuro cha meijin, for example, is made from the sweet Saimidori tea plant, and it's shaded for 3 weeks prior to the harvest, giving it a nice warm sweetness. Number 3, brew it at a lower temperature. Once you have your tea, you're going to want to make sure that you brew it properly. The third tip to produce a sweeter tea is to use a lower water temperature. Luckily for fans of sweet teas, the bitter components of green tea are harder to extract. If you use water that's too hot, these bitter catechins will be extracted and overwhelm the sweeter flavors of the tea. What you want to do is use lower temperature water or even cold brew the tea. To brew a warm gyokuro, we recommend you use 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit water. This will produce a tea with less bitterness. A more extreme version of this is to brew the tea with cold water. This method is used by some to create sweeter and smoother teas. Just add in 5 grams of tea leaves to the bottom of a pitcher, pour in some room temperature water, and let it sit for a few hours. After the time is up, you can then pour the pitcher into a glass and you will be able to enjoy a nice, cool, refreshing cup of sweeter green tea. Number 4, brew the tea for a shorter time. In addition to brewing the tea at a lower temperature, you may also want to make sure that you're not brewing it for too long. While this may not apply as much to cold brewed tea, even 60 degrees Celsius is enough to extract the bitterness if left for a few minutes too long. We recommend brewing for 2 minutes for gyokuro and 1 minute when it comes to other types of Japanese green tea. The reason gyokuro brews for a bit longer is because it is more tightly rolled, so it needs more time for the leaves to open up and release their flavor into the water. There's also less catechins in the gyokuro, so there's less bitterness to extract. Number 5, eat a sweet alongside your tea. The 5th and final tip when it comes to making a sweeter cup of green tea is to eat a sweet alongside of it. In Japan, it's not common to add sweeteners to green tea, but what is common is adding a dessert pairing. The reason for this is that when you sweeten tea, it disrupts the flavor, so it can't really be appreciated. By eating a sweet alongside the tea, you are able to appreciate both, but the sweet flavor lingers in your palate. I hope you have found this video helpful when it comes to preparing sweeter green teas. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Until then, we'll see you next time.